Marty. Welcome to the Benefits Mom podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So tell our audience here a little bit about what you do and about your new Shadowland AI project you got going on.
Okay, well, my background is in design and project management type stuff. So I'm good at putting people together and getting them to work well as a team. And I've been able to pull that over to LinkedIn and had this crazy idea about mental health, just looking at people in my own family, say 30 years apart, that had mental health issues. And I'm like, well, 30 years has passed and not much has changed that I can see. So I went out on LinkedIn, I asked some silly questions, I asked the experts, and they're like, no, I can see how this can work together. So we put a team of volunteers together, and now it's a full-fledged project that we're working on.
Great. And on your website, this would be a app that somebody could download on their phone and have access to the mental health services, right?
Essentially, it's got a couple different components to it, but the idea was put it in an app because originally I was thinking just for kids, but obviously it applies to everybody. So it's grown quite a bit. The app idea is the fact that everyone's on their phone. Sometimes it's the only way to reach people. Sometimes people don't have the resources or a social network to fall back on. Some people are homeless. There's a lot of different components out there. So if it's at least available in a app that you can carry with you, it's there when you need it, because mental health issues don't work on your own schedule. So you can't always sit down in a quiet environment and just deal with those issues. So it's there for you anytime you need it.
Yeah, and that's really helpful now with everybody working from home and on the go with kids and stuff like that. Is the app ready for people to download, or are you still in your beta phase?
Well, what we're doing right now, the experts, because I'm no expert, I'm just the guy who had the initial idea, and I'm basically the canvas, and they're putting the professional aspects to it together, because it's a serious topic and you need to know what you're doing, right? So they're developing all those tools. They're interactive tools. Some of it will be simply, what's your background? Do you have a family? Are you a middle child? Where are you coming at from this? Is it a PTSD issue? Is it depression? There's a whole, very detailed kind of set of criteria you would have to kind of go through initially when you set up a profile, and then that will give you the correct type of information right after that.
That's great. And you said earlier that originally the idea was to target the app towards kids. Why would you focus specifically there first?
Well, because I was looking at someone in my family when I was growing up who had an eating disorder as a child. And then more recently, I've got another relative who's about 15, and they've got their own challenges, and you've got your heavy medications and stuff that are prescribed now. And it's a case of, well, these things are 30 years apart, and I don't see how the core problems are being addressed differently. I'm sure there's a lot of nuance that's changed over the years, but not necessarily. It still takes a lot of time. Like, you've got to book time with an expert, you've got to sit down with them, and you're only getting maybe an hour a week if you're lucky. And that takes time, it takes money, and not everybody has access to these resources. So as an app, it's global. So right now we're working on getting more ambassadors to talk about the project locally around the world in local languages, understand what all the various local stresses are, and then feeding all that back into the app development. So to answer your earlier question, it's being developed at the moment. And the reason why I'm more active on social media is because we're developing a crowdfund. So we need a big crowd of people who are passionate about this so that when we launch the crowdfund in a couple of weeks, we'll have a successful crowdfund, and that will tell us how much resources we have so we know how much of the app we can develop.
Great. I'm excited for that. A lot of the moms that I work with, their biggest stressors are really anxiety with balancing home and work, and especially now with they're trying to work from home, but then they're also trying to either teach their children or at least monitor what they're doing if they have more older teenagers. So in your experience in the mental health, what do you think are good things that moms should be kind of keeping in mind when they feel like they're stressed or are anxious?
You've got to put yourself first at some point. And moms are really good at putting themselves last, I would think, right?
Right.
Everything else, and then I'll deal with me if there's any time left, right? And that can only go on for so long, right? And as you say with your podcast, it's like if it's not good for mom, it's not good for anybody type of thing, right? So it's a case of you could go as simple as you just got to stop and take a breath once in a while. And what the app does, just tying that back in, is it look like the higher level versions of the app, and it's all free, right? There's no cost of any of this, right? It's just a case of getting it out there for people. But the idea is that it can look at things like your Fitbit or your iWatch or even like a Nest thermostat, right? It can look at all the things going on in your life, all the stressors, and it can say, hey, okay, these 3 or 5 things have happened recently. Normally that creates a trigger for you, right? And so we're warning you kind of ahead of time so that you can book that time in with yourself to de-escalate before it goes from a small stressor to a big stressor to full-blown depression and 3 days in bed type of thing.
Right. I love the idea that you use the word trigger, because that's something that I talk about, like not with just myself, but like my one-on-one clients, is figuring out those things that trigger it. If it's a topic with your partner, if it's something that happens with your kids, so that ahead of time that if this happens, I need to kind of reset and evaluate what's going on.
Yeah, emotional triggers, everybody has them. They're normally blind spots, right? And it's when you're doing like that inner work, that shadow work, that again, you'd have to have the time, right? The personal time. You'd have to take that time to, read some Eckhart Tolle or something and go deeper into, why you do the things you do. The app kind of speeds it up a little bit and sort of shows you these triggers that you may not be aware of.
Yes, I think that is so helpful in today's world to be conscious of what your triggers are. Um, Going back a little bit to your project management experience, what do you think would be the best strategy for business owners out there who are trying to balance, all their ongoing projects, in a remote work, but also balancing the fact that people aren't just, working from home. They still have, uh, other responsibilities like children at home. So if you were talking to a group of like project managers, what would you say would be like the best strategy to manage everything in this environment we're in right now?
Well, it's building trust, right? If you've got a team you can trust, and listening to some of your other podcasts, you've got the whole thing sort of going back to work after being on mat leave or whatnot, and it's like, well, they want you back right away, but you've got to kind of ease in, and sort of the push and pull, and the trust factor. You know, some companies are looking at it like, well, someone's gone on mat leave, I hope they come back, kind of thing, and no one really knows exactly what's going on. And I mean, there's some, you know, there's some balancing that has to be done, right? So it's about building trust, right? If we're all on the same page, we can talk openly, right? And then we can come to an agreement, or at least if you make a decision down the road, that means, you know, it's not necessarily the best decision for the business, but it's the best decision for yourself. The business isn't blindsided by it because you've got that open conversation, and that's okay because it allows people to leave and come back, and you're treated as a valuable resource.
Yes, I absolutely think that employers should definitely start looking at their employees as resources, and not just their customers, because the customers keep coming back because you have good employees.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, if you're in sales, it's all about energy, right? I mean, yes, you've got a great product, or you wouldn't be talking to them in the first place because that product is filling a need. On LinkedIn, I'm constantly giving out free sales advice, or not just sales advice, just free coaching advice, if you will. That's my cat, if you can.
Ah, well,
My
good
wife,
morning to your cat too.
yeah, my wife runs a vet clinic, so we've always got the ones nobody wants.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's about being open, having that trust, putting yourself out there on platforms like LinkedIn, which you've talked about a bit in your other podcasts. And what I found is the more open you are, the more opportunities come your way, right? If I hadn't have done it in the first place, I wouldn't have had these wonderful volunteer experts come in and create this team, right? And then none of this would have happened. And then you and I wouldn't be talking, right? So
Exactly.
there's, and I get people saying to me, well, you know, why are you helping me? Why are you, because I put right in any connections. It's like, how can I help? You know how many people don't ask for help, right? And then I'll offer the help, and then people say, why are you being so helpful? I'm like, but it's LinkedIn. It's a business network. We're here to help each other. It's not about how many connections did you make in the last week, right? It's about how meaningful those connections are and how helpful we can be to each other.
Right. I get that a lot from people about how to, build up connections. And I said, you could have 10,000 connections, but you may only be connected with 50. And that's where you really have to focus on those 50 that really know you very well.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I mean, I've been on LinkedIn for over 10 years, and I look back at some of the people I first was on LinkedIn with, people I know in a local business setting as well, and they've still got like 200 connections, right? Because it was sort of the joke, right? It was like, well, you're only on LinkedIn if you're shopping a resume or something, right?
Right.
And
That was the joke.
and that was the thing. It probably was true 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, but everything's changing so rapidly now. I mean, the last 3 months, we're in a totally different environment, and people have to know how to pivot. If you've started multiple businesses, you're an entrepreneur, you're probably a little more anti-fragile, where you can pivot a little quicker. You can kind of see things coming and sort of reposition your business. I was quite shocked to see some posts on LinkedIn about, well, I set up a restaurant. It was my family business kind of thing. And now I'm looking at taking out a second mortgage on the restaurant just to keep it afloat. And that was within the first couple weeks of this thing happening. And I'm thinking, no, don't do it. Because it's, I mean, as an entrepreneur, and it's your passion and you're 100% committed to it, it seems like the only option. But from the outside looking in, it may be the worst decision. And that's where, and maybe I'm totally off base, but you need that network of people around you. They just happen to be on LinkedIn, and you'll get a range of opinions, and then you'll make your own informed decision at the end, right? It's a mastermind group.
Yeah, absolutely. The one of the greatest ones that there is. Uh, do you see leaders or businesses taking more advantage of remote work or teleconferencing as we slowly move out, or do you think people are comfortable in office settings and just did this as like an experiment?
No, I think what happened was the technology. Uh, this is Pablo.
Oh, hello, good morning.
So no, the technology was ahead of where we were. The technology's advanced over the last few years with, things like Zoom and whatnot, and people weren't really using it, right? And now we've got a reason to use it. So we're all in and everybody's, learning on the fly, and it's saving a lot of time. It's one more reason not to commute. It saves money. It makes sense for business. Like it won't change everybody or everything, and not necessarily overnight, but it's a pivot point. And, if you don't like it, unfortunately, it's something you need to adapt to. And if it doesn't work for you, then think of other ways that you can adapt, right? There's other technologies that aren't being used yet.
Right. Yeah, like could you see Shadowland being incorporated into like a corporate wellness program for employees who are having stress or anxiety issues, or maybe just in this transition period?
Yeah, we've got an expert on board who that's kind of their specialty, is dealing with teams and team stresses and getting people to play nice with each other.
Yeah, that's always key, right?
Right. So there is that. And see, when I came up with this, I was thinking, how can we use existing technology, like the things I mentioned, the Nest, the Fitbit, things like that, right? These are all things we have for the most part. So it's easy to pull that data and just utilize it for you, right? As opposed to giving that data back to, the cloud, if you will, and then that data is being used to feed you advertising or something else that's not really of a net benefit to you, right? Because it's your data. So HR departments, large ones in very big companies, are already using personal analytics for these sorts of purposes, right? We're just taking the same stuff and just giving it back to the people, right? So it's low hanging fruit. It's easy to implement, because some of the people that I'm talking to and starting to work with are doing exactly what I'm talking about, but just at a very advanced level. But they're talking about, thousands of dollars to do blood tests and scans, and it's going to take 5 years to implement this, and then we've got to talk to the regulators and the healthcare system and make it all work together. And it makes a lot of sense, and I need those really smart people to advise us as we go. But this is very much grassroots. Like, as soon as the crowdfund's done, we've got a model to get a basic app out within like 6 weeks. And
Nice.
then, well, because, and this is it, right? Because the people who are involved with this, who are volunteering their time into this project, they've had mental health issues and now they're mental health experts, or they're clinicians that deal with this every day. And the push is, we have to help people like now. People need help right now, type of thing. And it's got nothing to do with COVID or any of that. It's an ongoing need, right? So there's a push to get it out there. So the nice thing with an app, there's always an update. There's always, another improvement. So it's all free. So we can take the next 6 months after we've pushed the first 6-week app out, and we can develop those higher level features and push that out, and then take another 3-6 months and push out even more value, right?
Right.
And obviously getting feedback from the crowd over that time to refine and whatnot as well. We've got some beautiful people on board. I'm just like beside myself that I get to work with these people. They're just wonderful.
Yes, I can hear your passion in your voice. I'm very excited for the launch and for the crowdfunding. Uh, Now I get to ask you some fun questions as part of the podcast. So, Garrett, you get to have one meal. There's no consequences to it. You're not going to gain 20 pounds from it. What are you going to eat?
Mm. Uh, Curried lamb is always a favorite.
Ooh, okay. Curried lamb with rice or no rice?
Oh yeah, definitely.
What would you say coming up in your career was good intended advice, but really bad advice in the long term?
Hmm. Um, I that's a tough one because everything that's happened has always led to something good, maybe after the fact. You know, I've had one boss I worked for who he just loved to push everyone's buttons. He would just phone up each individual in the office and just kind of try and get them to play one against the other. And I was doing a lot of inner work at the time. So I was able to sort of go through the process of understanding what he was doing and still being triggered by it, to seeing the trigger and still being triggered by it, to seeing the trigger and it having no effect. But without that boss, I probably never would have been able to apply the shadow work and learn these things. Right.
Ah, so
So,
double-edged sword there.
well, just take any of those stressors in your life and see if you can make them work for you. See, like some people say, well, everything happens for a reason or whatnot. Well, that's the reason. You just might not know what it is at the time.
Right. What is your favorite activity outside of work? I know it's a little limited right now, but if we were in regular times, what would be like your favorite activity outside of work?
Uh, I like to jog. You know, I try and get like 3 to 5K in every day or two. I'm not super tight about it, but you know, it's a good de-stressor. But when you're running a startup, you know, you're 24/7, 7 days a week. There's no real work-life balance.
Yeah, that can happen with entrepreneurs and startups. Yeah. Uh, Last one. What is your favorite book?
Oh, there's a beautiful book by a fellow called Michael Brown out of South Africa. Um, it's called The Presence Process. Came out about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And it's the most beautiful thing, especially for moms at home. It involves hot baths. Lots
Ah,
of hot
there we
baths.
go.
And it part of it is it's a way to kind of build up that uh, the anxiety, the energy inside that's kind of bothering you, and it's about kind of getting in this hot bath and releasing that energy into the water. It's really cool.
I like it. I'm going to put it on my list for my reading challenge I'm doing.
Excellent.
Garrett, thank you so much for coming on today. I am very excited about your app and your crowdfunding, and we'll definitely be in touch. And thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.